What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I wanted to show you how to care for my Mammillaria Geminispina. Now, real quick, I wanted to go ahead and thank my Patreon subscribers. If you are interested in supporting my channel through Patreon, please check the link in the description box below. And as always, if you don't have the monetary means to support my channel that-a-way, feel free to share my videos with all your family members and friends who love plants as well. Those always help me out tremendously. Now, you've probably heard this plant called the clumping golf ball cactus or the twin spine cactus. But it's very popular. It's an ornamental kind of a really pretty plant because in the springtime, a ring of pretty small and beautiful magenta colored flowers will form at the top of each tubercle and bloom. So this plant is very popular with horticulturists and collectors all over the world, and it's won several awards because of its beauty and its clumping size. And they in nature can often kind of clump into a group up to about 3 feet wide. So they do get rather large, but they are really slow growing cacti. I've had this guy for a while, and he's got 9. You can actually see 8 clumping little tubercles up above the soil, and when I planted it, one of them actually was hidden down below. So yeah, you got to be very careful because they are known as the twin spine cactus because they do have a lot of different spines, really smaller ones, and then some kind of longer, sharper ones in there as well. So make sure your pets and your little ones don't come into contact with it because it will hurt. And as I was saying, it is native to around Mexico, so it does like the heat. And it does like a lot of light. If you want your plant to look really full and have a lot of spines on it and to just look normal, you want to give it a whole lot of light. Plants that don't receive a lot of light often get kind of etiolated and turn really green and just don't look like they're supposed to look. So I would say for established plants, 6 or more hours of direct sunlight a day. And for less established plants, around 4 or 5 hours, but they do need a lot of light. So I would have it if it was in the spring and summertime. After the danger of frost has passed, I would go ahead and set it outside and make sure that it is kind of unobstructed light because they do enjoy a lot of light. And if you do have the smaller ones, you can have an individual little tubercle or a little round one. Eventually they will kind of elongate or kind of spread out more, but they might fit in a smaller pot on like a windowsill. So like a southern exposed window, if you're in the northern hemisphere, or a northern exposed window in the southern hemisphere, would be ideal. Maybe even a west-facing window would suffice, but I wouldn't go north and I wouldn't go east just because they do need a lot of light. And as I was saying, the plants that don't get a lot of light are really kind of susceptible to rot. So you will be doing more damage if you don't give it enough light. And if you have it in a location that isn't getting enough light, I would strongly consider using a artificial kind of grow lights and LEDs. Full spectrum, those really kind of help. There's been a lot of advancements nowadays. They're not expensive to run or to purchase, and they can actually run for a long time and actually do really well with your plants. So light with these guys is very important. Water, during the spring and summer, you want to kind of water fairly moderately, water enough that it will soak throughout the entire pot, but always let it dry out in between before you water it again. These plants don't need a ton of water, but during the growing cycle they can use some, but like I said, you always want to let them dry out in between, and that's why I have mine in a terracotta pot, because it will help wick the water away from the soil and help you so you don't have to worry about root rot or any kind of other rot on the plant with a lot of water. Plants that get too much water or not even a whole enough water can end up losing root mass that will die back and probably kill your plant if left unchecked. So always with cacti, make sure yours have drainage holes in the bottom, and if they do have little saucers that are built in, flip them over and use a drill and kind of just drill through it. If you're drilling through terracotta or kind of clay or porcelain or anything like that, just kind of let the drill do the work for you and apply some steady pressure, and eventually it will break free. And if you do have a plastic one, you can use a knife, or with adult supervision, heat up a screwdriver and puncture it through, or you can just use a regular electric screwdriver to help you create more drainage holes in the bottom of the pot for that. But like I said, I strongly encourage using a terracotta pot for this plant, just because it is porous and it will help wick water out of the root mass way quicker than any other kind of pot like plastic or clay or anything of that nature. That brings me on to soil. They really like really well-draining soil, obviously. So it likes loam, kind of loamy soil and sandy soils. Soil that is specifically designed for cacti and succulent are really beneficial to this plant. Like I said, they like to have water, but they cannot stand in saturated water soaking wet all day. Your plant will rot quicker than anything else out there. So make sure you have a lot of sand, horticultural grade sand or like builder sand added into your soil. If it's maybe even regular cacti soil, I would probably still add a little bit more sand in there too to kind of help with the drainage. If it holds on to too much water, your plant will die. Now when you go into the winter months, you really want to drastically cut the water back. You really only want to water it maybe about once a month. You're really just going to keep it from shriveling up. So enough water just to survive, and that's it. A way that I've found to actually get your plants to bloom or flower more is through dormancy. Your plants or your cacti need to have a nice resting period where they get ample amount of light to kind of keep them going, but water sparingly, only enough just to keep your plant alive. Because if you're watering it too much in the wintertime, it's not going to have enough light to kind of keep it up and have it photosynthesizing and processing water like normal. So I would strongly cut back on the watering and only water it just enough to keep the plant alive. And then this guy can actually tolerate fairly cold temperatures. They say you want to keep it at least around 50 degrees in the wintertime or a little bit lower. I put mine in the garage and let it get pretty cool out there. It's unheated, but it's got the walls and everything to protect it from like strong drafts before it gets way too cold. So a dormancy to get this guy to flower in the spring. Make sure he's getting ample amount of light, not too much. Cut back drastically on the water. Hardly any humidity at all, if you even give it any humidity, and then keep it pretty cool. You don't want to freeze it, but you want to kind of keep it up above freezing, around 40, the high 30s, lower 40s, somewhere around that, and don't really let it go above 50 degrees for a couple of months. And if everything goes accordingly, your plant should flower come spring. Like I said, you'll see a ring around each tubercles, sometimes kind of scattered throughout the whole cacti. And that's really what they've won their awards for, because they're kind of small, magenta, really pretty flowers that will give way to fruit later on down in the growing season. So, as I said, these are very popular plants. They're very easy to take care of. They don't have much weight in the disease department except for rot. And that's just really brought on by its environment. If you're not giving it enough light, you're giving it too much water and too much humidity, your plant will succumb to rot, either on top or below the soil, and your plant will die back. So you really kind of do have to know what you're doing, and I would probably say a more lazy gardener would have more success, because if you're watering it too much, it's going to die. Just stick it somewhere where it'll get ample light and just forget about it. Unless you're in Kentucky, that seems to be getting more rain during the summertime than Seattle does. So you might want to stick it somewhere where it will have a little awning over it so it won't drown, because here in northern Kentucky, it seems to be all we ever get is just rainy days anymore. And with my cacti collection, it spells disaster. So you got to kind of pay attention to these guys too, because not much will take them out. Like I said, just ample light, a little bit of water, no humidity, and they're pretty much good to go. They say that you can fertilize them every couple of weeks. I've probably fertilized this guy once in the summertime, and that was it. I use kind of a liquid all-purpose cacti fertilizer, and that's really it. They're cacti, they thrive on neglect, and if you're adding a bunch of fertilizer, you can end up promoting some blooms, but most often than not, you're going to end up getting a lot more kind of green, kind of not really what it's supposed to look like. But you can give it some fertilizer. Like I said, they do thrive on neglect. And if you've just repotted it, you do not want to actually give it any fertilizer, depending on which one you've used. As we know, Miracle Grow promises about 6 months. So if you transplanted it and then you're feeding before the 6 months, then you probably will end up hurting your plant, because they are cacti. They're found in Mexico, where it's warm and there's not a whole lot of nutritional value out in that soil for them, and if you're giving it a whole bunch, it's not going to be used to processing that, and it will burn your plant out and kill it. So you got to rein that back just a little bit. But other than that, I think the only thing I've ever encountered with this guy is they do have a problem with mealybugs. So you'll have to be careful, because the spines aren't that thick, but they can get down in there and kind of have a field day, especially down in the cracks where the little, I don't want to say balls, but tubercles kind of form. Bugs can get down in there and settle in, and they're just about impossible to get out. So you may end up having to use some neem oil or some rubbing alcohol, and use Q-tips to get down in the cracks, or paintbrushes, because you don't want to stick anything else down in there, because it may break off and then hurt the plant, and doing more harm than good. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was propagation with this plant. A lot of times people will go ahead and kind of cut one off and give it to somebody else, and they can go ahead and throw it into some new soil and start a new plant that way. If you do, make sure you allow the cut to fully callus over before you go ahead and plant it again. That means not really giving it much water, kind of setting it off to the side. A little bit of light will be all right, but you don't want it to be too direct, just because you're not going to be giving it a whole bunch of water, and you want it to actually form a callus before you stick it down in that dirt again, or you will end up inviting rot into your plant, and it won't last long that way either. Now, I said earlier, when they flower, after that they will produce fruit. With seed collecting, you can allow the fruit to ripen and collect the fruit, and then clean the fruit out and the seeds, and then you can go ahead and plant the new seeds. And if cleaned properly and gathered properly, they can store for a while. So if you do get some and you're not ready to plant, or you don't know when you're going to do it or whatever, they can store if collected and cleansed properly. With that kind of juice on there, it will invite rot, so make sure you do kind of wash it off and kind of clean it off just a little bit, and it will be ready to plant it. Now, I've never propagated through seeds with these guys, but I do hear that you do have to let them wash and cleanse, and then they'll be ready to go ahead and plant and come up the following year. Other than that, that's really all I wanted to say about this plant. Like I said, it's very easy to take care of. Sometimes it will cause a little irritation if you bump into it. Like I said, these stems aren't that painful, but they are pretty sturdy. So if you kind of fall onto it or get poked by it, you'll know it, and you'll swear you probably hit bone, because they can actually break off into your skin. So be very careful, because they will end up causing a lot of harm. They are great plants to have. One of our potted plant pals, and I really enjoy this beast right here, because it does take a while for them to get this size, and probably I'd say even 10 years before it's even close to being fully mature, if not longer. But if you've got time to just set it on a windowsill, water it occasionally, and forget it, it'll be right as rain. They're great plants, and I really don't do much in the way except after I water it every once in a while. I will kind of look it over to make sure I don't see any kind of filaments to kind of suggest spider mites or any kind of movement around of the white kind of mealybugs. And that's why I do have this gnat nix over the soil, because I do leave it outside up until about late October, maybe early November, because they can take pretty cold temperatures for a while, and they do need a dormancy rest period, and the cold weather will kind of help them out to flower as well. Well guys, that's really all I wanted to say about this plant. Until next time, leave me a comment and let me know if you would ever have a plant like this, or even if you like this plant. Like I said, it is pretty large, and it's a beautiful plant to have. And let me know if you've ever had any kind of success or failures. This guy's been off to a pretty great start, but I can see where a lot of people would end up having problems with theirs. And if you like this video, hit the subscribe button or the thumbs up. Those always help me out tremendously. Don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.